Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. Doing that. But the Big 12 actually opened things up on Tuesday. And let me just say this. If you read the tea leaves, if you're listening closely, if you're paying attention to what's going on in college sports, let me just say this. It feels like we could possibly be on the verge of another round of realignment. This is the never-ending question in college sports. Had somebody ask me literally today on Wednesday, Torres, when do you think this big break-off is going to come, at least for major college football? What will it mean for everybody else? I think it's coming pretty soon, and it feels like kind of the kernels, the pebbles are starting to kind of get leaked out a little bit in terms of some people aren't happy, some people are ready to make a move, so let's go ahead and dive in. So again, Big 12 Media Days is this week. And what's interesting is if you go back through the history of realignment, at least the most recent wave, this is the time of year where news breaks. Remember, it was 2021. Texas and Oklahoma officially announced that they are leaving the Big 12 for the SEC. That broke at SEC Media Days in 2021. Last year, remember, Colorado shows up at Pac-12 Media Days, what ended up being the final Pac-12 Media Days. They say all the right things. Within a week, they have officially announced that they are leaving the Pac-12 for the Big 12 by the end of July, early August of last year. The Pac-12, as we knew it, ceased to exist. So it feels like something is coming. Seen some stuff from Greg Sankey, seen some stuff from Brett Yormark, the Big 12 commissioner, and there was actually an interesting update that came out on Wednesday of this week, so literally today. But before we get into it, let me just go ahead and give a backstory because really right now it feels like this next big wave of realignment, it really does feel like it centers on essentially two schools, really one, as Florida State is very clearly leading the charge to get out of the ACC. Both Florida State and Clemson have filed suit against their own conference. Where this stems from, listen, I think in my opinion, this all really goes back to 3-4 years ago. I guess it was 3 years ago exactly, when Texas and Oklahoma announced they were leaving the SEC. And by the way, we're going to do just a little bit of background just to get everybody caught up, just to refresh your memory. I know that Florida State, ACC, realignment battles aren't necessarily always at the front of your mind. But at the same time, this really started 2021 when Texas and Oklahoma announced they were leaving the Big 12 for the SEC. It started this crazy moment in time where everybody's trying to figure out what's the next move, where can I end up, what's the safest spot to land. It was a crazy, crazy, crazy thing. If you remember at the time, there was actually a thought the Big 12 wouldn't survive and that 3 or 4 teams from the Big 12 would go to the Pac-12. George Kliavkoff, the Pac-12 commissioner, couldn't get his conference presidents on board. And so because of it, the Big 12 rallied, the Big 12 survived, and then they were the ones that really stuck the stake in the back of the Pac-12 a year ago. So in 2021, you started hearing these rumors. Florida State, Clemson, they're not happy in the ACC. My buddy Mark Ryan, who used to host radio in South Carolina Broadcaster of the Year, shout out to him. He at one point put out a tweet in 2021 that said Florida State and Clemson have reached out to the SEC. At the time, all the big J's, they were furious. This is nonsense. This is ridiculous. And then basically every move that Florida State has made since then, alongside with Clemson, has really led to, it is pretty obvious they're trying to get out. First time that I really remember everything really starting to ramp up, felt like it was about 18 or so months ago. I remember 2 Februaries ago. So not this past February, the February before, but there was a big report about Florida State school president and their AD essentially having a meeting in which they basically explained why, first off, it started as we need more money from the ACC. And I should even backtrack a little bit, right? So this is all really about dollars and cents, is that with the state of college sports as it is, the SEC, the Big Ten, both conferences are set to make about $70 million a year in TV money. As Brett Yormark, the Big 12 commissioner, said at the media availability on Tuesday, he said, we have established ourselves as the third best conference. They're making about 40, and the ACC is making closer to like 35 to 40 million a year. And so everybody in the ACC is mad because they're stuck in this TV contract through 2036, essentially another 12 years in this awful deal. But Florida State, and to a smaller degree, Clemson, are especially mad because Florida State and Clemson generate the vast majority of the money of the revenue that the conference produces from TV. Florida State, as I said, about 2 Februaries ago, had this big meeting and all the documents got leaked out where they basically said every big TV rating the ACC does, Florida State is involved. So Florida State LSU the last 2 years, Florida State Clemson, Florida State Notre Dame, whoever they're playing, they are the biggest draw in the league. And so it started with Florida State basically saying, wait a second now, we're already $35+ million behind the Big Ten and the SEC every single year, by the way. So it's not like they just fall behind 35 million. They're 35 million behind the SEC and the Big Ten every single year. And that keeps kind of compounding season over season over season. So they're not happy about it. The original complaint from Florida State was, we want a bigger chunk of the ACC pie. In other words, why are we making the same money as Boston College and Pitt and Wake Forest and bluntly these tiny schools that nobody cares about? And so you see that. Then from there, it becomes, we just want out. And of course, a few months ago, as I said, that was when both Florida State and Clemson filed suit against the ACC, basically saying this grant of rights, this TV contract through 2036, we can't do this, we want out. And so I bring it up because that's the background. And this week, it just feels like there's just a lot of stuff going on, okay? So first off, Brett Yormark, the Big 12 commissioner, kind of had an interesting little smirk when he was asked about further realignment, further expansion, further whatever, because at Big 12 Media Days a year ago, he was asked about realignment. This was when the Big 12 was still at, Texas and Oklahoma are leaving. They have these 4 new schools. And Brett Yormark kind of winked and said, we're open for business. And so why that matters this week is because he was asked about realignment again on Tuesday at his press conference. And he said, we're still open for business. Think it's also worth noting Greg Sankey, his tune has really changed in the last couple months. You go back to SEC Media Days a year ago, he said our full focus is on our 16 members, including Texas and Oklahoma, who are joining this year. Well, fast forward to the SEC meetings in the spring, and he had a little bit of a different tone, kind of trying to not dip his toe in it. He said, we respect that there are agreements and situations that prevent a lot of movement, so our focus has been on our 16, but I pay attention. We've seen media members come out and say it feels like something's coming. Josh Pate, CBS Sports 24/7, said within the last week, he said, I'm hearing, and I don't want to speak for Josh, but on his own show, he said, I'm hearing something's coming in July. And again, it feels like something is, especially, and this is the important part, and this is the update, those lawsuits that Florida State and Clemson filed, we found out this is boring legalese, but it's kind of important. Florida State filed a lawsuit against the ACC in Florida, Clemson the same in South Carolina. And a judge basically came out on Wednesday and said, wait a second now, the only place that they can do this trial is in North Carolina because that's where the ACC is headquartered. So we know Florida State wants out. We know North Carolina wants out. But the counter to that is obviously it will be a favorable setting if and when they go to court. And so to me, what becomes super interesting, what are these next few weeks and what do these next few months look like from both Florida State, Clemson, and the ACC perspective? We have heard that Florida State is potentially willing to take on private equity money because, to be clear, they can't just leave the ACC. As I said, the TV contract, the grant of rights runs through 2036, and so they would owe literally hundreds of millions of dollars if they decide to leave or if they force their way out. The ACC kind of owns all their TV rights, at least their home games for the foreseeable future. And so they're going to lose tens of millions of dollars, eventually becoming hundreds of millions of dollars. And so I just bring it up because Florida State's kind of got to figure out a way to recoup that money. And so we've heard about private equity. We've heard about Saudi oil money. And it's just crazy that this is where we are in the current state of college sports. The ironic part, and this is the part that I think is interesting. And by the way, I don't think this was helped a few months ago when, or about a year ago. Well, I guess it was 6 months ago when Texas or when Florida State was left out of the college football playoff. I think that made Florida State feel like we are definitively in an inferior league. We are definitively behind the 8 ball. I think it was just bad luck because I think if Jordan Travis doesn't get hurt and they destroy Louisville in the ACC championship game, they destroy Florida in the last game of the season, they're probably in the playoff. But I bring it up because what'll be interesting to see is what happens next. Florida State clearly wants out. But as I just said, the wild part about all of this is that the system is actually very much in favor of Florida State right now as we speak. And I bring it up because if you look at the situation with Florida State and Clemson, what I find interesting is if Florida State actually just sticks it out, you know who I think actually has the most advantageous path to the college football playoff going forward? It's going to be Florida State and Clemson. They are two programs along with Miami that are operating at a completely different level than everybody else in the ACC. And so remember, in this new 12-team college football playoff, at least right now, the top 5 conference champions not only get an automatic bid, but the top 4 get a bye in the first round. And so you're sitting there, you're looking at it, and you're sitting there saying like, well, wait a second now. Them or Clemson's basically going to get a bye into that final 8 every single year if they just stick it out. But Florida State is so caught up on the money and the respect and the prestige and the this and the that. I think they're going to cut off their nose to spite their face. Also worth noting, even if they get out of the ACC, somebody's got to want them. Right now, the SEC does not seem interested, and I think they would get pushback internally the same way they got pushback from Texas A&M when Texas wanted to join the league. I don't think Florida would be happy with Florida State coming in. I don't think South Carolina would be happy with Clemson coming in, especially as we get deeper into this new era of college football where so much of the power is going to be consolidated in both the SEC and the Big Ten. From the Big Ten perspective, listen, that has been, believe it or not, the more likely landing spot from the beginning. But I will say, I heard Paul Feinbaum say this the other day, and I know Paul says a lot of crazy stuff, but this one didn't feel too crazy to me. He said point blank, he's like, well, from my perspective, I don't see the Big Ten being a fit because there are those academic hurdles. It is a fair or not, make fun of it if you will, but those school presidents take their academics seriously. And the 4 schools that were added, 3 of them are elite academic schools. UCLA is a great academic school. Washington's a great academic school. USC is a great academic school. And so Florida State might not be the perfect fit. I'm not telling you it's right or wrong. I'm just telling you that's what we hear. And so I just bring it up because it'll be fascinating to see what happens next. But between Brett Yormark's comments that we're still open for business, between the lawsuit kind of coming to fruition in North Carolina over the last couple of days, it feels like this thing is ramping up. People are talking about it, and we'll see as we get into SEC Media Days next week. And then, oh, by the way, ACC Media Days